Sometimes, but not always, you will see a guy who has made a name for himself to the point where you think that the WWE needs him more than he needs them. If there's one thing to take from this year, 2018, it is that we have seen that happen, and his name is Cody Rhodes.
My hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Yeah, blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin. Deepest blue is my hat is like a shark's fin.
The rumors of my untimely demise have been greatly exaggerated. What is up, people? This is the Shark Attack. I am Sean Williams. I am back. And I do apologize for the long hiatus. Both cold that I didn't expect to catch, which unfortunately happened, and also creative block can really be a pain in the ass. But I am back and ready to just go out swinging the way I normally do. So that being said, we got a lot to cover, and I mean a lot to cover. So without further ado, let's go. Let's dive on in. This is the Feeding Frenzy.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Shout out to my good friend Brian H. Waters. Of course, make sure you check out his show, Break It Down with Brian H. And of course, subscribe to on YouTube to The Wrestling Realm. Him and Dwayne Allen are both good friends of mine, and they deal with some of the best wrestling knowledge that you'll ever see. But he did a poll on which show has the better feuds between SmackDown or Raw. And I can honestly say from my own experience, SmackDown not only has the better feuds, but I'm more invested in them than I am with Monday Night Raw. I mean, look at AJ Styles versus Samoa Joe. Look at Becky Lynch versus Charlotte. Those are two of the prime examples right there, and I'm a lot more intrigued with that than I am with anything else. And oh yeah, now more recently, Rusev versus Aiden English. I gotta give credit where it's due on that one, because I honestly thought that splitting up Rusev Day was gonna be a countdown until Aiden English got the pink slip, or future endeavored, or however the heck you want to phrase it. But they're turning it into something here. How long it'll go for, who knows? I mean, I'll give credit here because I thought when Aiden English was moved up to the main roster with his former partner Simon Gotch, the Vaudevillains, I didn't think the Vaudevillains had a snowball's chance in hell on the main roster. Why? Because that audience doesn't even know what vaudeville is, or at least half of them don't. But that being said, while SmackDown, they seem to know what they're doing, Raw just doesn't seem to know what they're doing. I didn't think I'd see the day where, after taking the belt off of Brock Lesnar, it doesn't feel like much has changed, or at the very least, it's made things almost, in a degree at least, worse. But, you have a champion who is present in AJ Styles. And I apologize, I remembered one other feud that SmackDown has that I'm more invested in, and that's Daniel Bryan versus The Miz. What do all these rivalries have in common? There's substance, there's build, there's drama, there's anticipation. Which is the least I can say about anything on Raw right now. But more on that later. But hands down, I think SmackDown produces a better quality show. And they're 2 hours, and of course Raw is 3 hours. But it's just a shining example of quantity doesn't always equal quality. We haven't gotten quality from Raw in the last several weeks, and that's being generous. But SmackDown lately seems to just deliver again and again. And frankly, like I said, quality over quantity, and sometimes less is better. And next topic. And I meant to talk about this a while back when it first happened, but like I said, situation kind of got out of hand. As a wrestling fan, we get to witness history being made in certain moments. We've seen that happen with Renee Young being added to the Raw announce team. And you know, I cannot be happier for her. I mean, she has demonstrated commitment to that business again and again. And she knows the product. And frankly, she delivers. I'm pleased with her work, and I'm glad WWE made the right choice in bumping her up. I mean, Coach, with all due respect, was just not getting it done. They've had him on the announce team before, and he's just not that good at it. Corey Graves is also a breath of fresh air, which I enjoy his work. But at some point, Michael Cole's got to go. I think the second you remove him and whoever you put, well, it would have to be somebody good in between Corey Graves and Renee Young. But every now and then you got to change things up to keep things fresh for the announce team, and that is definitely long overdue. But mad props and respect to Renee Young. She's earned it, and she deserves it. And it's a hell of a thing when you could say you're a part of history, and she is definitely part of history right now. So with that being said, people, again, congrats to Renee Young, and let's hope we keep seeing more moments like that when history is made, because truthfully, that's one of those things that makes being a wrestling fan worth being a wrestling fan. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the Feeding Frenzy. Alright, and yeah, I know I'm still using that sound, but you know what? Growing up with the Transformers, that one doesn't get old. Alright, let's go into the next segment. This, people, is the mic drop.
Let the battle commence!
I'm going to change things up a little bit. Usually I'm always talking about WWE or Ring of Honor or NXT for the most part. I'm actually going to talk briefly about TNA Wrestling. Yeah, I know they call themselves Impact, but they still haven't really done anything to make me believe it. But of course, Bound for Glory is coming up, and I believe it's coming up. And of course, the world title match is Johnny Impact versus Austin Aries. And you know, I got a couple things on this one. Austin Aries has always struck me as a better heel, and he's demonstrated that. And in terms of wrestling skill alone, Johnny Impact / John Morrison / Johnny Mundo / whatever the heck name you want to give him, he demonstrates his ability. And you know, I enjoy watching his matches. Now, do I think that TNA will actually give him the belt? Why not? Bound for Glory has been their WrestleMania, and usually the MO has been to have the crowd leave happy. I mean, however big the crowd they have nowadays is. Now, is it enough that I would want to order the pay-per-view from them? I don't know if I'd go that far, but it is a worthwhile main event on paper. And, you know, I mean, here's the thing. When I have watched it, I have been impressed with the matches, and they have been actually worth watching. But I'm not ready to say that TNA is on the rebound or having a turnaround. They're not even close to that yet, and they still got a long way to go. But with Bound for Glory, who knows? They may actually pull it off. So, here's to hoping, because, let's face it, Eric Bischoff once said controversy creates cash. Well, another thing that creates cash, competition. And while TNA may not be competition right now, and is a long ways from being competition from WWE, competition is and has always been a good thing, especially for pro wrestling. And that, people, is my mic drop. Now, I don't know about the rest of you, and I know that there's plenty of fans that are diehard enough to where they'll be getting up at whatever hour it'll be on their time zone for Super Showdown. But I'm one of those that I'll watch it later on the network, but you're not going to see me getting up at the crack of dawn or before the crack of dawn to watch Super Showdown. Why? Because I need that little thing called sleep. And Sundays is one of the few days off that I get, and I'd rather keep it that way. But more on that later. Right now, before I take a break, there's something else I gotta say. Like I said, I'm playing catch up here, but there's something else I got on my mind. This, ladies and gentlemen, is what we call shark fiction. As I mentioned, right now, NWA World Heavyweight Champion and IWGP United States Champion, and of course, let's not forget the success that was All In, which came out of his own pocket and the Young Bucks. There really is, right now, no bigger hot commodity in pro wrestling than Cody Rhodes. Now, we've seen this happen before where the Young Bucks made themselves a brand name, made themselves a hot commodity. Adam Cole made himself a hot commodity. Kenny Omega made himself one as well. Now, am I saying that he's at that level? No. Hear me out. I'm saying he's not at that level. He's surpassed that level. Cody Rhodes right now is at the top of his game, and he hasn't even hit his prime yet. I don't think he's even close to his prime yet. He has got plenty in the tank. He's got youth on his side, and he has just done so much in the span of the last couple years. I mean, really, what more could you ask for? I mean, you could ask that, but truthfully, you could ask it, and I guarantee you, he'll give you more. Why? Because that is how good he is right now. He didn't need the WWE to make success. He made his success without them. Now, I'm not saying he'll never go back. It's just like I said in the intro. They need him worse than he needs them. He is right now, he's working the schedule he wants. He's, of course, working with his wife. And, of course, also, let's not forget, part of one of the elite group stables in wrestling right now, that is Bullet Club. And, truthfully, I don't think there's any younger star that has done so much within such a short amount of time than Cody Rhodes has. I mean, leaving WWE seemed to be a breath of fresh air for him, and he is just, it's one of those things where you look at what he's done and it just defies belief. Case in point, AJ Styles, when he left TNA, he went to New Japan and he went to Ring of Honor and revitalized himself. That's what, and doing so, put him on the WWE's radar. And it was to where, with him and Nakamura, that they were holding the cards and WWE pretty much offered them whatever they wanted and eventually made them an offer they couldn't ignore. And look where AJ Styles is at right now. The WWE champion, and he is probably the most popular wrestler right now, definitely on the SmackDown roster, and quite possibly the most, if not one of the most, over in the WWE right now. Don't tell me it couldn't happen for Cody Rhodes. Oh, it can. Cody left the WWE to find himself, and you know what? He did just that. It's like he's carrying on the Rhodes family name. God rest Dusty. And not only is he carrying that legacy, he's revolutionized it. So right now, I couldn't be happier for Cody Rhodes, but I also couldn't be more excited to see what else he has to bring to the table, because the way I see it with his career right now, he's just getting started. And that, people, is shark fiction. Alright, that being said, I'm going to give myself a little bit of a breather. We'll be right back right after this, so people, don't go anywhere.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen, this is Brian H. Waters, and you're listening to The Shark Attack with Sean Williams.
And we're back. Thank you for that plug from Brian H. Waters. Like I said, make sure you check out Break It Down with Brian H. on Podbean and on iTunes and on SoundCloud. And of course, make sure you subscribe to The Wrestling Realm on YouTube. I needed a little breather from that one because I still got a lot more that I got to catch up on. So we already tackled the good. Now for some of the bad. This used to be called Question Authority, but frankly, that's not really the question we're asking usually on a weekly basis from Raw or wrestling in general. But in this case, let's face it, it is about Raw and how it's been the last couple weeks. So this is where we ask the question, who writes this crap?
Who's in charge over there? This is aggravating me now. What, I can't count on you people?
Baron Corbin, or Constable Corbin, or whatever you want to call himself now, or General Manager Baron Corbin, it's gone the way of other corrupt authority figures that we've seen in wrestling. Stale, boring, and predictable. Enough. He keeps changing matches and just doing everything that we've seen time in and time out from Eric Bischoff or Vince McMahon or whatever other authority figure you can think of. But this whole angle with Baron Corbin has gotten old. It's gotten old, and it needs to just be wrapped up already. I mean, the one right now, I would say my favorite authority figure in wrestling, or in WWE right now, it's got to be William Regal in NXT. Why? You don't always see him. He doesn't have to be there all the time. And he's not so much heel or face, he's more neutral. And frankly, that's all we need. We don't need to have an authority figure there all the time. But yet WWE, with the exception of Regal, just doesn't get that. They have to make it that the authority figure is more over or as over than anybody on the main roster. Well, guess what? Baron Corbin was never that over in the first place, and this isn't doing him much better either. So, they need to end this already. Whether it's Kurt Angle coming back or whatever, it needs to end. Next topic. The Dogs of War. And you know that group. Braun Strowman, Dolph Ziggler, and Drew McIntyre. And they can call it whatever they want. They can call it the Dogs of War. They can call it the Three Amigos. They could call it Larry, Moe, and Curly for all I care. But no matter what name you give it, I see it as only one thing and one thing only. Sabotage. Sabotage of Braun Strowman. Braun was more over than Roman Reigns. He was getting cheered for more than Roman Reigns. People were practically screaming for him to cash in and win the belt instead of Roman Reigns. So what does WWE do? They turn him heel and side him in a stable that makes absolutely no sense and has no real purpose in the long term. So that's the only thing I see with the Dogs of War, which I would not be surprised if it doesn't last past Super Showdown. I mean, Dolph, who knows what you're going to do with him, but eventually We know that a singles run and even the Universal title or WWE title, depending on which brand he's on, is in the future for Drew McIntyre. As for Braun Strowman, I worry if too much damage has been done. If they just waited too late and now he's reached a turning point where there really is no way back. That there's no turnaround for him. And if that happens, then that's the WWE's fault. Why? Because they couldn't stand anything that threatened the anointed one that is Roman Reigns. Speaking of Roman Reigns, I'm over the Shield reunion. I don't care who turns heel on that group, but I'm just over the Shield. I mean, look, I like Dean Ambrose and I love Seth Rollins. But eventually we know they're not going to stick together forever. At some point we know they're going to split again. And, frankly, when you have the group together and you have Roman with the belt, it's not really doing any of them any favors. Hell, Seth Rollins is the Intercontinental Champion, and he hasn't defended that belt since SummerSlam. And Dean Ambrose, what is he doing? Yeah, they keep teasing the idea that he'll actually turn heel, but is it actually gonna happen? I mean, look, I get that the Shield were over. I get that they're red hot, and I get that they're young. And I get that there's a nostalgia with them. But nostalgia has a shelf life, and it doesn't last forever. At some point, you need to have a plan for after the Shield. And sooner rather than later. And finally, speaking of Super Showdown, enough with the international Super Shows. First it was the Greatest Royal Rumble, now it's Super Showdown, and then it's Crown Jewel. Enough. Because these international mega shows that you're doing are hurting the national shows locally here. If you don't believe me, look at Hell in a Cell and the quality of that pay-per-view. You're trying to squeeze so much in a short time frame, and it's hurting your product. Maybe if you weren't so focused on doing shows like this, maybe you'd actually be able to manage your talent better and actually use some of the guys like Bobby Roode or Chad Gable in a way that's better than what you're doing with them now. Or maybe, just maybe, you might not have screwed over the Revival when it looked like they were getting pushed again. I get it's business, and I get that Saudi and Australia probably shell out a lot of money to do these shows. But the bottom line here is, you're doing these shows, and of course you got, well, maybe that doesn't count as much because Evolution is an all-women one. But WWE, you're trying to squeeze in too much in a short time frame, and all that's going to do is wear down your staff and just dampen the quality of the shows you got going on here. And trust me when I tell you, you can't afford that. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is, once again, who wrote this crap? Alright, people, before we wrap things up tonight, I got one thing I want to do. One poll that I did over the week, or before, during the hiatus, I did in the group, on my Facebook group, The Shark Attack, so I'm going to bring that to light. This is From the Mouth of the Shark.
Smile, you son of a bitch!
Alright, so, it was listening to 83 Weeks with Eric Bischoff and Conrad Thompson that this topic came up. Now, they talked about Vince Russo winning the world title. And, of course, we all remember David Arquette at one point won the world title in WCW. So, the question that I asked, which was the worst WCW world title win between David Arquette or Vince Russo? And for those that participated, it was a landslide, as everyone that participated in this poll said that Vince Russo was the worst world title win. So, let me explain why I also agree that it was Vince Russo. Dumb and stupid as it was that David Arquette won the world title, there was at least a purpose behind it. It was to promote that dumb Ready to Rumble movie, which, let's face it, it stunk. But there was a cross-promotion thing going on with that, or product placement, whatever you want to call it, but the bottom line is, it served a purpose. There was a reason behind it. Now, Vince Russo, the only thing he served that served from him winning the world title was a glorified writer who was really a one-trick pony that basically was trying to live out his wrestling fan wet dream of being a WCW champion. And you could take David Arquette winning the title and throw that in a blender with David Flair being handed the U.S. title, and I guarantee you it'll still turn out better than the fact that Vince Russo actually is in the record books as WCW World Champion. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is from the mouth of the shark. Alright, that being said, yeah, I know I didn't end the segment, but I didn't use it because, frankly, we're at the end of the show. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you subscribe and write a review on iTunes. And check out the show. The show is available on both iTunes and Podbean. We'll be back next week, and this weekend I will be working on the new episode of Variety Bites as well. Got a lot to talk about on that one, too. So with that being said, I want to thank you guys for tuning in. This has been The Shark Attack. I am Sean Williams, and people, I am out of here. Good night now.